Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Scott Schober, author of Hacked Again. Scott, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be on. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Are you ready to get started?
I am ready.
All right, question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
The first thing that comes to my mind is the importance of educating yourself. I always tell people, talk to every single person you can within the book ecosystem. I know when I reflect back, when I first started writing, I honestly had little to no experience writing at all. But during the journey of writing my first book, I learned a ton of information, especially from other authors that have already gone down the path that I was about to go down. So I encourage people to put in the time. I think it's important to schedule time each week to write. I would have to actually do that, jot it down on my calendar, so it started to become a routine and discipline. So I had a kind of a milepost that where I was and maybe the goal where I was trying to get it finished to. And every time before I'd even sit down to my computer, I would try to think about it in my mind, kind of formulate a few thoughts. And as I did that, I would learn each time I'd sit down, it would flow much better so I can get it from my mind to the actual written page on the keyboard. Probably one of the most effective things for myself is using the text-to-speech. I did that on my MacBook Air. For me, it was an extremely efficient way to write, so I can kind of speak my thoughts, and that way I can have it then read it back to me after I would finish a paragraph or finish a chapter. And it really helped improve the process of just sitting there pounding away at the keyboard. So keep educating yourself, talk to everybody you can, and find what little systems and things work for you to help you get through that writing process, because otherwise it will tend to drag a long time. It took me from start to finish, the whole process before my book was really available for somebody to buy was about 2 years. So it takes some time.
Well, and text-to-speech is such a great method. I actually use the Rev Audio app, and I'll give you an example. We're putting together a 100-person book project called the Get Published Business Book. We have just under 50 people right now that are already taken part in the project, and one of our guys here is local in Arlington, great guy, name is Stan, and he had a really hard time just getting the information for his chapter on paper. So I actually met with him at, I think it was Chili's last Friday, and all we did was we sat there. He's very conversationalist, really, really nice, friendly guy. He'd talk all day. But what we did was I actually hit the Rev app, hit record, and I said, Stan, and we have like one prompt for the book, and that is tell us how getting published would change your life, both professionally and personally. And that was it. He was off to the races, and he talked for a good 7-8 minutes. And we were able to take that information, and it was perfect. And then what will happen is my editor, she'll clean it up a little bit. But from that point, we hit stop, we hit transcribe, we sent it to Rev. I think it was like 6-7 minutes of audio. So the total cost was $7 because they charge $1 a minute. Typically, it takes around 12 hours to actually have them send back the transcript. They sent it back within 37 minutes. We received it while we were still at the restaurant together. I sent it to my editor, and she was already cleaning it up. And it's just such a quick method that for those of our listeners that struggle with getting that information out into a Word doc, or if they're doing it old school and doing it on a notepad, one of the great ways is to just speak out your book. Think about 10 talking points, one talking point at a time, and even have someone ask you a question. Have someone ask, hey, how would getting published change your life? Or why are you an expert in your field? And then just answer the question, record it, and then transcribe it over to Rev, and they'll send it right back to you in a Word doc. I just think that's such a revolutionary way that people can share their story without having to worry about traditionally writing the book out.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And I think that's the whole key, which you kind of pointed to. If you can find a way to efficiently share your story, for me, typing it out, the physical typing of it actually would slow you down, because you tend to almost get caught up with sentence structure and punctuation and spelling and all those other little idiosyncrasies that a writer might um, get bogged down with. But when you just speak, you're actually kind of picturing it in your mind, and you're just speaking. So it truly then becomes conversationally telling your story or sharing your story, which translates, I think, to a finished manuscript much faster.
Yeah, and it's just like having a conversation. You're sharing your story. And that's the
Hmm.
main thing people need to realize. You need to share a story. You need to paint the picture, and the easiest way to do that is just by having a conversation with someone else and just getting it transcribed. Really is a quick and easy way that you can get your book out there with the world and not have to worry about having to type up everything.
Yeah, true.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
For me, it's probably the time aspect. I probably have too much on my plate always, and maybe that's a common answer for most authors. I don't know, but I have a family at home. I'm running a successful wireless security company, so about 30 people that work for me. Um, Much of my writing is done in my head, so I need to have time to have my head clear. I work long hours. I present at conferences. I do a fair amount of TV and radio, weighing in as a subject matter expert for cybersecurity. So when I have that time or carve out that time, I have to make it count. So if I'm traveling on a plane, I'm going to utilize that time. If I'm in a car ride and I have chance, I'm going to utilize that to again do speech to text or whatever I can. If I wake up in the middle of the night and a thought pops into my mind, I keep a pad next to me. I jot down a couple thoughts. So it's really time management for me is very important to get me through that process so I can actually get published. Because otherwise, for me, it'd probably drag on forever with all the distractions of my life.
I just love what you mentioned. I felt like I was literally looking in a mirror, just as you were mentioning that, because I'm the same way. I always want to maximize time. If I'm
Mhm.
driving, I'm usually on the phone through my wireless system in the car, or I'm thinking of notes, thinking of ideas. I'm actually going to be 5 weeks from today. I'll be on a flight to Maui, 10 hours
Mm.
each way. Fortunately, flying first class because there's no way I could be flying in coach for that long. Being I'm 6'3" and 200 and a whole lot of change.
Oh
So
wow, yeah.
I'm not going to take that risk. But the main reason is that I want to be comfortable in that flight so I can be productive. And
Yes.
as you mentioned, I have a ton of things I want to accomplish on that flight. I want to read a couple books. I want to be able to create the at least start with the draft for the Maui book, because this is actually going to be my third book about Maui. And the reason I do it is, one, to be able to share the story, but the other part, just being blunt, is you get the tax write off. And when you
Yeah.
can write off most of a $10,000 trip, you definitely want to take advantage of that. So for me, it's all about being productive as well. Where if I'm like, okay, I have a 10-hour flight ahead, what can I get accomplished on this flight? What are the things I can do to move my business forward and to move the next book project forward as well? And I just love that you have that same mentality.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And if I was going to Maui, I would do probably very similar things. I'd have one movie that I'm going to watch. I have certain music picked out. I'd
Mm-hmm.
probably listen to an audiobook or read a book that I wanted to do to get me kind of get my mind stimulated. I'd want to make sure I focus in and say, okay, I want to accomplish 2 chapters or 3 chapters of whatever I'm working on. Sometimes I'll write a blog on something. So having that little detailed, organized thought process for maximizing a trip on a plane to me is the best thing. Otherwise, you go out of your mind just sitting there staring at the seat in front of you.
Exactly. I actually have a prospective client on a flight to Hungary in the next few weeks, and I told her the same thing. Come up with the main talking points for your book, come up with 10 of them, and then start to elaborate. Because when you're on a flight, especially international, anytime you're going over the ocean, you're not going to have Wi Fi for the most part. So you can just sit there, you can focus, and you can get really clear on where you want to go. And I actually had a guest on the show a couple months ago, and he was talking about that he had a client that would literally get a round trip flight to Tokyo from, I think it was New York, if I'm not mistaken. And the whole reason he would do that, it wasn't to go to Tokyo. It was to get his book done on those flights, because he had 13 some odd hours that he was going to be in the air. And that was just such an interesting idea. One, I couldn't personally do it, because if I'm going to Tokyo, I want to go to Tokyo and hang out. I don't want to just be in a plane for
Yeah.
the sake of it. But it's a brilliant idea, because you can keep yourself very focused and get very clear during that time, because you literally are just sitting there. You might as well
Yeah.
maximize that time.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant, but it's also a little crazy too. You got to give him credit though. He probably accomplished a lot. That's the key.
They got the book done.
Exactly.
That was the main thing. Well, speaking of once the book is done, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Okay, I'll share a number of different things here and just jump in if I'm going on too much. But I think to me, almost the easiest part of a book is writing it in some ways to actually get out there and sell it. What I've certainly learned, and again, running a company, selling products, you have to be the best salesperson there to sell your book. So to me, it's tell the entire world, everyone and anyone I possibly can about my book and use every means to do that. So even prior to my book officially being available, I started my outreach. I signed up and joined, you name it, everything, every type of organization locally here close to me in the state, and that New Jersey Business Association, NJBIA, New Jersey Tech, local commerce, IEEE events I signed up for. I went to local schools, businesses, computer shows, wherever I could have an opportunity to present on the topic. And my book was Hacked Again was my story of a small business owner being hacked, what I learned, and I shared tips to help people so they in turn could be safe from cyber hackers. I went to the local library. I was surprised. I went in and I said, hey, I wanted to donate a couple books. Here's an early copy of it. Can you carry this? And they said, oh, this is great. Would you like to talk to our audience? We have speakers come in once a month. I said, absolutely. And I said, can I maybe split whatever proceeds? If can I sell the book? They said, sure, we'll do a fundraiser. And so I split whatever I made in half. I gave half to the library for the renovation project. They in turn reached out to all the other libraries in this large consortium that they were part of and said, hey, here's a local author presenting on this book. We recommend you carry this book also. He supported our fundraiser. And then suddenly, boom, I'm in all these different libraries buying my book. So it kind of creates a situation that you never would expect that could go viral. I tried the same thing at Barnes and Nobles. They carried my book, which was wonderful. But I went into a couple local ones and said, hey, I'm curious. Do you guys allow authors to come in and speak and do a book signing? They gave me a point of contact, chased it down, set it up, and I spoke at a couple bookstores locally and was able to invite people that were local, that were friends and family and coworkers and so on and so forth. Fabulous. Again, none of these things cost money. They just take time, and you have to be a little bit creative and not afraid to sell your story and put it out there. So I always encourage people to really do that. And the way I viewed my first book was it's almost became like a business card. One thing it was another author early on encouraged me to do is mail out and hand out as many books as you possibly could and put a personal note in it. At first, my mindset and other people that I've talked to encouraged to do this, they're saying, but then those people aren't going to buy your book. Not true at all. Actually, it increases sales dramatically, and it's done in a different way. So when I'd write a little personal note to somebody, and I would send it, be it maybe it's a person in the media, maybe it's a publicist, or maybe it's a booker or producer, whoever it is that I'm targeting. Write them a little note, and here's my story. Hope you have a chance to read it. Blah blah blah. I can't tell you how many times the radio station called, TV studio called, producer called, said, hey, we want to learn more. We have a few questions. Would you come on to our morning show? It really does work. And so many people are always afraid to do that. And I encourage them, do it. Take the chance. Even if it costs you some money, it's well worth it. Better than spending thousands and thousands of dollars in advertising that it may or may not work and it's hard to measure. I also suggest this, which I think really works. For me, it worked uniquely. I went out and bought a bright red reflective mailer. It looks almost like a present, like it's wrapped or something. I stick a copy of my book in there, a little slick sheet talking about it, stick my business card, a book note in it. So every one of those books I mail goes out in that bright red reflective book mailer. And I've had so many people call me afterward or tweet me or email me and say, I got this wonderful present in the mail, your book. It was wonderful. I love the colored reflective mailer, blah, 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 blah. So it kind of became a little bit of my trade signature that I would send out to people. And I'm looking forward to doing that when I launch my second book, to again do a mailer, personal note, and just put it out there. The more you put it out there, I think they in turn become your sales channel. So if you have a colleague in the industry, a friend, a relative, you give them the book, they're going to start to tell the world. And I think it's important for anyone that's listening, don't be afraid to ask also, um, to please be honest and review this book after you had a chance to read it. Write up a little review on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Google, or blog about it or whatever. To me, that helped greatly. If you make it personal with them, you make the connection. I've got, I think, 190 reviews on Amazon since I launched my book, which I think is pretty good when I look out there comparison, and it gives you a good pulse and feedback what your readers feel about the book. And for me, it helped me to adjust maybe some of my writing for my second book so I can improve on it and become a better writer and reach the audience even better. The other piece of advice that I really think is effective is do a launch party. I hear a lot of people that they don't want to spend the money. It's this, it's difficult. I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have fun. I went to basically the Prudential Center here in New Jersey, and it was a New Jersey's Devils hockey game. I rented a private room and brought in 100 plus people, family, friends, media, business colleagues. And then afterward, I rented a double suite and just fed everybody and let them drink and relax and enjoy a hockey game. Everybody had their little swag bag with a book that I signed for them. They took it home and started telling the world, gave them a T-shirt. So I try to tell people, don't be cheap and think that you're going to sell a million books. Be willing to give away things because it'll come back in volumes to you. People will be generous when they get a nice little present for your book and they meet the author and it's signed, and they'll make the connection with you. So take the time to do that, and I think it really will develop down the road into further sales and more sales. I think I've had many people. In fact, I had one, a gentleman that visited me just the other day. He was introduced through a friend, and he was an insurance person that was 5 minutes away from my company. He walked in. I thanked him. Afterwards, I mailed him a copy of my book and signed it. He called me up the next week and said, this was a wonderful gift. He goes, I'd like to come in and buy 20 of your books, because I want to hand them out to all of my colleagues now. So sometimes when you do things, it comes back thanking you in different ways.
When you bring up a lot of great points too, and one of the topics I wanted to touch on again was about being featured as a subject matter expert, because it seems like everything that you have done has all been part of that process to be featured. Obviously, you have the book,
Absolutely.
that's your big entryway, your business card, so to speak, but all these other events as well, you've increased your authority by being that subject matter expert. Therefore, it's giving you opportunities to speak on different newscasts, podcasts, radio shows, those types of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. And if you can use that platform, you're reaching a much larger audience than you ever could imagine. And for me, in my industry, we sell cybersecurity wireless threat detection tools. I'm now being asked to go to cybersecurity shows and get up on stage and share my story and share the things that I've learned and speak as a subject matter expert. So I get to have the opportunity to place my company and products in front of people in a soft sell way, but I'm also being compensated to speak. So you're getting paid as a speaker. I usually tie it in and encourage them to buy X number of copies of my book, 50 or 100 copies, so they can give out to attendees, or the first 50 people that register get a copy of my book. That's a very effective way, especially if it's a smaller venue, a business luncheon, or maybe it's an event where it's only 100 people. I did one recently, and it was for a high-end appliance manufacturer, Sub-Zero and Wolf. They brought me in. They provided me compensation. They bought X number of books for each person in the audience. Now they got to talk to the author. I presented for 1 hour, and then I stayed around for another hour of questions. We had a beautiful meal that the chefs cooked. So it's kind of a win-win thing for everybody, and it ties you in closely to your audience. these become your readers. These become the people that then reach out to you. They tweet you, they email you, they call you, ask for advice, questions. And to me, it's a wonderful way to build up your own following as an author, especially if you're planning on releasing a additional book or books down the road. So you want to stay close to your audience, and everybody always talks about that. And I find that's an effective way by presenting. And so, some of my presentations I don't charge for. I'll pick and choose some of them. Most of them now I'm at the point where I'm compensated, and in some cases they'll compensate you, they'll cover your expenses, they'll take care of you, and that makes you feel even better. But you don't want to lose the fact that you want to connect with the audience every opportunity you can. That's what it's really all about, not just selling books.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I think one of the standouts for me, and again, I am a computer geek. I like hacking. I love to talk to people in that community. It's my passion. It's my hobby since I was a little kid. And I always encourage people, your career should be something that you kind of love to do. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Since sixth grade, seventh grade, when I became the president of the computer club, I'm still surrounded by computers and hacking and copying and pirating games. As a kid, I'm still surrounded by all that today. A read that I highly recommend for people that are geeky and in the world of computers, it's called Ghost in the Wires by Kevin Mitnick. Kevin Mitnick, and I won't spoil the story, but basically he's the world's most famous hacker. He spent some time in federal prison for some of his hacking antics, but it really helps open up that field of cybersecurity and hacking to the average person, and especially to those that are techie and love computers like myself. So that would be my my number one book that I've read.
I remember him. He did quite a little bit of time in prison, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he did. He hung around the likes of Steve Wozniak and Jobs
Yeah.
and others that were into the phone freaking, and it's some really exciting stories to hear some of the things that they've actually done out there. And I was fortunate. I had the privilege of speaking at several events that he was actually speaking at. So we got to hang out. I also had the opportunity twice to actually interview him on my series, on my show, and for a couple other shows as well. So you get to really know somebody, not just read their book, but to then interact with them and connect with the author. To me, is just it's a wonderful thing.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
I would say it came from this book because I often relate to this and reflect back on it. As mentioned there, this is again Ghost in the Wire, Kevin Mitnick's book there. He eventually got caught. He spent years in federal prison there. And when he got out, one of the quotes in his book, he mentions, often I still keep hacker hours up late eating breakfast when everyone else has already finished eating lunch, busy on my computer till 3 or 4 in the morning. That always resonated with me and stuck with me because that's like myself, especially when it comes to doing research, for developing products, for writing. I'm the guy that loves hacking and fooling around on the computer in the wee hours of the night, and you kind of forget about sleep and you forget about eating because you're so consumed and so focused on what your goal is. And I think writers often can relate to that. When they've got a story inside them that's burning, they got to get it out. So you got to stick with it, and you kind of put aside everything else for a period of time until you can share that story. So again, that just is a standout quote that always stood out in my mind.
Scott, I want to thank you for being a guest on this show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Probably just go right to my website. It's www.scottschober.com. And they could also visit me on Twitter. I'm busy on Twitter often. It's at Hacked Again Book or at Scott BVS, Baker Victor Sam, after my company.
Scott, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much. Great to be on there, Paul. Keep up the good work.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.